After almost 2 full years of this show, it has come to this one night. It has come to this. This is Wrestling Man's Wrestling Show, the 2nd annual Buford Awards, episode 100. And that's about as much if I could take of that song. Hello everybody, welcome to the 100th episode of Wrestling Man's Wrestling Show, right here in the Wrestling Man Studios, where you could see Christmas gifts behind me, deer heads behind me, everything behind me. I am your host, Bill Yankovi, and this is the 2nd annual Buford Awards. Now, for those of you that are watching for the very first time, you're wondering, what are the Buford Awards? Well, the Buford Awards are like the Emmys, the Oscars, the Grammys. It's the award show of award shows for professional wrestling, where we honor the best and worst in professional wrestling, and also in other categories like entertainment, podcasts, in the world of sports. Now this year, a lot of categories, a lot of new ones. As a matter of fact, there are four new categories that are added to this list. And why don't I start off tonight's 2nd annual Buford Awards, see my tux, with one of the new categories this year, and that is the Feud of the Year. Pretty self-explanatory. Feud of the Year. Doesn't need any more saying. The nominees for the Feud of the Year are, from Ring of Honor, Austin Aries versus Jimmy Jacobs. From WWE, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels. And from Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, the Human Tornado and Chris Hero. And the winner for the Best Feud 2008, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels. What started off as a fake injury ended up being not only the best feud in 2008, but will go down in wrestling history as one of the all-time greatest rivalries and feuds with Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels. What made this rivalry so legendary and what made it one of the great feuds of all times is the promos that both men cut in this seemingly storyline that would go on hopefully forever. Both men brought not only their A game, they brought everything. And they brought up their level to 3 or 4 notches. Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels win the Buford for the best feud of 2008. So that's basically how the awards work. Alright, why don't, where's my pen? I know I got a pen here somewhere. I think it's in here. Oh well, I'll find a pen later, but why don't I go into another category, and that is the Podcast of the Year. Podcast of the Year. These are all the podcasts that I listened to during throughout the whole year, and I picked basically the ones that are the best one. The nominees for the Podcast of the Year are the Baseball History Podcast, the Chikara Podcast A-Go-Go, the Sharpshooters Wrestling Podcast, the Grizzly Bear Egg Cafe, Harry Hog Football, the Mike and Joel Show, Pinfall Recall, PWB Podcast, the Smart Wrestling Fan Wrestling Review Show Podcast, We Talk Games, and A Wiggly World. And the Buford for the best podcast of 2008 goes to the Sharpshooters. The Sharpshooters podcast, hosted by three enthusiastic wrestling fans who happen to all be brothers, come out every weekend with their own opinion and a little bit of their own comedy that really isn't planned material. These men are wrestling fans through and through and show in their podcast every week why they've done over 250 plus podcasts. So the Sharpshooters win the Buford for the best podcast of 2008. Alright, time to go into one more brand new category, and it is the podcast moment of the year. Now, when you ever listen to your podcast, on your iPod, you always have these, different situations, these different moments that, make you think about it and make you remember. Well, the first winner of the podcast moment of the year, sort of an easy one. The winner for the podcast moment of the year goes to Smart Wrestling Fans' very own Wiggly for proposing to Chiz live on the 3rd anniversary show of the Smart Wrestling Fan Wrestling Review Show. Wiggly and Chiz had been dating for 5 years, and all of the fans, not only of Chikara but of the SWF world, were wondering when was the day that Wiggly was going to pop the question to the beautiful blonde known as Chiz. It took place in a nice June evening on the 3rd anniversary of the Smart Wrestling Fan Wrestling Review Show anniversary show, when Wiggly proposed to Chiz to marry him, and of course she said yes. I'm very glad to tell you that Wiggly and Chiz are still engaged. They've been engaged for 6 months now, and hopefully they will announce a wedding date real soon. So congratulations to Wiggly and Chiz for winning the podcast moment of the year. Coming up next, more awards to be given out, including the line of the year, the stupidest person of the year, the MILF of the year, and the game of the year.